All right, cool. So, this is gonna be a like two-part, or I guess a three-part meeting. Generally, I want to wrap this up no later than something like 25 minutes from now. The idea is that this becomes a regular meeting to discuss the way that the CPS is run, including things like the current state of the projects on the CPS, the functionality of the CPS, so that we can direct our efforts towards like the most optimal solution for public funding for our community. Um, and then also about the like function of the working group as one of the elements that is like a proprietor of the sustenance of the CPS. It's not going to be like the only thing that sustains the CPS. Obviously, we've got the developers and then myself who's doing a lot of the management at current. But this is like an important avenue for kind of bridging the gap between the community and the product itself. So, like I said, this is a couple parts to this meeting. The first one is going to be the intro, where I'm just going to talk to you guys a little bit about what I'm trying to organize with this. The next one is going to be about the protocol and the ideas that have been kind of in motion for a while for development of the CPS. And then the third part is going to be just a completely open discussion. I will be moderating that discussion. So if there are things that are like about specific projects and like people who are unhappy about, maybe the way that like your project didn't get funded or something like that, those are more relevant discussions for the UG sustainability chat or the general chat. Here we're going to focus on for this specific meeting, ways to make the funding cycle more productive and ways to better engage the community to participate in making that happen. So that's kind of what should be like relevant topics. But don't worry about that too much. So yeah, without further ado, let me start with the intro. This is run by a user group called the Sustainability User Group. You may have seen that word and special interest group flying around here. Basically, what that means is like just do the same thing that you're doing, but also we're organizing structures for the Icon ecosystem to both grow and track its current state. A little bit more in line with the way that a typical open community does its organization and tracking. And we've made some progress with that so far. There's been some collaboration between the Sustainability User Group and the CPS project. If you want, I'll send a link. This is the information about the Sustainability User Group. You can read like, why did we establish it? What's the scope of this group? What is out of scope of this group? What are the projects that are being run by the group? So yeah, that's kind of the brief intro. Expanding on that a little bit, this meeting is specifically for the CPS. It's going to be held probably once per either month or once per 2 months. Not fully certain. I would like to get some feedback on the frequency that you guys think is appropriate to hold this meeting. And then I'll explain a bit later some of the ideas for how we can use this time to like keep everybody engaged. So yeah, that's the intro. The next thing is the agenda items to go over. And this was a collaboration with TJ. So basically what we've laid out in this agenda, which you can see the 3 parts here, is how the CPS product should be developed moving forward, and the product is including the community aspects of it. I'm going to explain what is the like social steps that should be taken, what are the short-term protocol steps that should be taken in order to make immediate improvements, and what are some of the more long-term things that should be done for the CPS in order to improve it, but that maybe will take a little bit more time and planning effort. So from the beginning, the most important thing, in my opinion, about the CPS is aligning the community around a collective mission and vision with a plan for how to achieve that mission and vision. This sounds like a pretty general goal. I would say the reason for structuring a general goal like this is because up until now, the CPS has kind of been like an ad hoc product. It's mostly being managed and run by the Icon Foundation, and there's been a lot of input and interest from the community on how to run it further, given that it is a project that is like representing the decentralized ecosystem and the interests of all of the validators and delegates and even community members. It ideally should include like a study element, like focus element from the community to make sure that we are representing their ideas, because community's got a lot of great ideas. So the first thing is to define the meeting structure, and I'll go a little bit more in depth as to how I think we should use this time. Not today, because this one's going to be heavy on like introductions, but basically I'll send this link out. What I would like to do is create focus group element to this meeting focused on feedback for projects, from projects and from community members. So the way that I see this working is basically projects should regularly have things that they want the community to to answer for them, and the community should readily be looking to provide feedback on what they think of the different projects and what they think of like how it's affecting the funding cycle and whether it seems like a fair system. The reason that this is useful is because the CPS product is directly based off of funding for the ecosystem, based off of inflation from block production rewards. And that is the main filter for turning like a general set of information into how the product of the CPS gets developed in the future. Yeah, and it also helps people kind of feel connected to it, which basically is what the community should feel. They should be in charge of things like this. So what I've done is kind of proposed these templates for feedback, and I'd like to start introducing them perhaps in the next meeting for like just a social element of I'm this project and I would like to get feedback on my project, represented by this team. I will ask specific questions and provide context about my project, and then expect for the community to give me some response about it. And then there's a second template that I'm proposing about requesting feedback. I guess this is just from the other side. So we've got both the teams and then we've got the community members that can ask and receive feedback on how the projects for the CPS are happening. The main benefit of this is that we currently have some issues with delivery of projects, and it seems like there's a bit of a disconnect between the teams that are developing and the teams that are invested in funding and voting. And in my mind, you can propose a lot of really complicated like incentives and penalties, but ultimately, if your team is disconnected from the community that you hope for your project to be engaging with, then you're going to end up with a project that's at least slightly left. Like, there's going to be something about it that isn't completely accurate. So what we want to do here is like bridge that gap, make sure that, you know, the product is being developed by or for the users of the product. And then also we can reflect on how funding got used and make better like incentive and penalty systems based off of that. So I'll be sharing these and then hopefully introducing these two teams that can give, and then users that can, teams that can request and users that can give feedback in the next meeting. Maybe we'll reach out to some groups to try it out. So that, excuse me, is the first bit about defining the meeting structure. And the second part of the meeting would be just like an open discussion, basically. So there will be like a focus group element and then an open discussion. The next part of getting organized as a community should deal with looking for more efficient structures for this like open funding source. A lot of communities do DAO-based funding. This is like loosely DAO-based funding as well. It kind of extends the concept of a DAO to like the network validators in a way, but it is basically the same thing. And there's a bunch of really solid examples of what, like, you know, successful or at least interesting funding communities from DAOs look like. Thanks to TJ for suggesting these initial examples. So looking more into things like MakerDAO, Atom 2.0, Phantom, Gitcoin Protocol, Optimism Collective, and Robbie, I know you gave me one or two more that I need to add to this list. But yeah, basically like comparing from sort of a social and, you know, a game theory perspective, like how is the community interacting with their public funding source in order to get efficient or inefficient results, and how can we like take things from these other communities and put it into ours. So that is like, you know, initial goals for CPS development with respect to like planning out these meetings and then looking for ideas on how to organize the community a little further. The second thing is about actual protocol modifications, which is like sort of coding and development. The previous cycle of development ended a couple weeks ago, and we're planning for the next cycle of development. And previously, that planning had mostly been done internal to the Icon Foundation. However, you know, it's a community project, and the community often knows best about a lot of things. So while the like management of the development and the actual development itself will continue to be done in the same way as prior, at least for now, there's going to be more discussion about which things are important to prioritize by like receiving community input for creating that next development cycle and funding for it. So some of those things that are looking for improvements are based off of the smart contracts, the front end, obviously some social stuff like I just mentioned, marketing and communications, and then potentially some other things. This is kind of the internal like document for what some of those ideas are. You can view, there's a in basically like the GitHub issues, but I'll share in a more succinct way what are some of the actual tasks that are associated with CPS development, and how are they prioritized. One of the things, just as an example, is about the proposal and progress report template improvements. There's an issue which you can see on the CPS repository number 67. Let's see if I can get to it. which is about changing something to do with the project categories section. When people are describing their projects, they typically have a couple of categories. Cyrus is proposing this, and this is also kind of supported by myself and TJ, that those categories be changed to more general categories related to like not just development and community activities, but like more typical categories for how do you say, like how a team would represent themselves. So things like development, marketing, running an event, documenting something, or some other topic. So that's one example, and then just to give you a second example of something that is currently in the pipeline, possibly for the next development cycle, is about mandatory progress report sections. I'm not going to go through this one. You can read through it if you want. It's CPS issue number 77. But basically, there should be some community input on which things to prioritize from the overall open issues. And then that will get fed into what becomes like contracted out for development for the CPS in the next cycle. You can see the issues if you go to this link. I'll share all the links that I'm opening up after the meeting. So yeah, this will just like help you to say like, I think we should prioritize it this way, this way, this way, whatever. I really like this. I really don't like this. I want to add another one. Let's see. Okay. So that's the next section about improving the existing protocol is development. And that's a thing that we're going to have to discuss as a community. Again, there's a lot of introductory stuff here because this is the first of these meetings, but in the future, we'll go over the specific issues as well and see what is going well and what needs to be improved. Last thing is about longer-term protocol upgrades. So this is sort of more like if you've got an idea about like, maybe it's like a philosophical idea, or maybe because it's an open funding community, you've got some idea about like the ethics of like how validators are sponsoring projects, or how teams are pitching projects based off of what the project domain is or where their stance is in the community, then that would go under the category of like larger protocol upgrades, most likely. Kind of succinctly stated goals introduce and explore improvements that improve long-term sustainability of the CPS as a protocol. So there's a bunch of different suggestions here, including changing the way that funding works based off of delivery or milestones, having something based off of reputation to help understand who's proposing and who's voting a little better. Some things like having, domain-specific funding pools in case, like, as a community, we wanted to put more money into infrastructure or more money into events and marketing. That would be like that. Different incentives and penalties for sponsors to account for like successful, or how do you say, like, unsuccessful behaviors. Things related to ICE Network, which, that may or may not be relevant to this. Things like anonymizing voting, potentially to like, make people vote or allow people to vote in a more comfortable way, and then general comments on treasury management. And then again, I've got this working document here and some of the ideas that TJ and I have written up so far, and I will share this document with everybody for just general viewing and comments after this. So, all right. I know that was a lot of information. I hope that wasn't too much like word vomit. I tried to keep it pretty consistent with what's on the agenda and not sort of ramble too much. But I'm going to open up this discussion. We've got about 10 minutes left. And again, I'm going to moderate what's going on. So, let's talk about some of the stuff on this agenda. We can start with maybe like, do you guys think it should be monthly or bi-monthly? And do you have thoughts about the like ways that we should use this time to give feedback on specific projects, or discuss like developments of the CPS? Yeah, so let's see. Does anybody have comments or things they want to bring up? You can type it in the chat, or I don't know, is there a hand raise option, Russ?
No, unfortunately, there's no hand raise option, but you can put your comments in the voice chat on the email lounge, or if you want to chat, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Cool. So yeah, you can just unmute yourself if you want to say something.
So Paul
right.
asked, what is the goal of? You just asked for that, sorry.
No, thank you. So what? Yeah, Paul asked, what is the goal of CPS? We should define this very specifically before going forward. So I have some comments on this. I'm sure a lot of people have comments on this, but Paul, if you would like, would you unmute yourself and give your perspective? Why is this a question that you're asking, and do you think that there's a goal for the CPS? What is it, if you think it?
Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm having dinner, so I'm keeping it short, but I think it's important if we want to decide on things, what we are doing as a group or like a decentralized organization or whatever, that the goal should be outlined very specific because otherwise, how can you measure and how can you decide on what we should do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, a specific goal could be, for example, well, the goal is of CPS is to generate more transactions on the Icon blockchain, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And oh yeah, so yeah, I've said something on the forum on this as well a while back, that perhaps should think of something like the SMART goals, so specific, measurable, and three other things.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember
So
at the
like a
moment.
KPI type of a goal.
Yeah, so yeah, so I think because otherwise it's like we're a bit blind, and somebody will say, well, this is good. Another person will find that is not good. But if we can agree upon on what is the goal, that I think that should be very important and one of the first steps if you want to do something as a in an organization.
Yeah, I agree. Does anybody else have comments on what Paul said, or have a different goal in mind for the CPS that they think is appropriate?
I go back on mute and have my dinner.
Thanks, Paul.
Yep, ciao.
Yeah, I'll add a bit of context for myself in terms of kind of what we talked about in the beginning of having like a collective mission and vision or the CPS, which is very related to what Paul has saying, and I definitely agree with Paul. I think especially for DAO governance, which is already pretty hard, for like specific protocols, say like balanced, I think the goal of the platform or the protocol is a lot more clear because it kind of just does one specific thing. When we're talking about something like Icon, that's a general smart contracting layer that is focused on interoperability, but we've had some of these side initiatives as well in terms of like ice and snow and various different things. I think kind of like the goal of the CPS and like what has been funded has been a bit like all over the place. So for like one validator that's voting on the CPS, interoperability and like generating like B2B transactions might be more important than someone else who might feel like even just like general icon transactions might be more important. So I think it does kind of go back to Paul's original point that having a clear like vision on what the CPS wants to be funding and supporting is probably the most important before we decide how to structure the platform to support that.
Cool. So if anyone else has comments on that, either Paul or someone else, and I know Robbie, if you've got things that you would like to add, since it seems that your mic is having some issues, can you just type them? Or yeah, Roche might be helping you out as well.
Yeah, what I would say is if you have too much structure in place, you don't want to limit yourself for all of those projects that are actually looking to maybe expand outside of Icon. And I'm not saying that that's the direction they should be going, but it is also going to help Icon in terms of the bridge. So it would inevitably be bringing more transactions back through Icon because of it. So I think whilst we have good structure in place for that, we need to just be mindful that we don't limit it so requests won't get accepted.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that point, and I think one thing that Eric's actually talked about more recently is kind of like getting more, not like venture funding, but ways to support projects that have a path to profitability. So that'd be like dApps or whatever NFT projects and stuff. I think the problem with something like the icon tracker and like bridge connections and stuff is you can't really raise outside funding for that. There's no like way for investors to recoup their investment. So I think along the lines of like public goods funding, those make a lot of sense for the CPS. And then like you brought up, alternative projects that definitely benefit the network have like additional ways to raise funds. So I think that's just like kind of what we would have to decide if the CPS wants to just specifically support public goods and not support projects that are able to like make a profit, or if we want to support all things that benefit Icon.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost might be a good idea to separate out the two, to have them in two sections. So you'd have one which is clearly defined for pure Icon blockchain, and then, like you say, you'd have a separate section maybe that we would go down a different route for the I can't even say it, interoperability.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a mouthful.
Interoperability.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a really good point. If Eric scrolls up a little bit, I think one of the this is a big document, so maybe not, but one of the ideas for exploring like larger protocol upgrades, which has been talked about, I think, by some community members, is doing like that specific bucketing of like funds that are in the CPS treasury.
Oh, here.
I like specifically funds are used for public goods, and then some are used almost as like a venture arm of the Icon community to internally invest. So, but I think that's a great idea, and even just like having a clear goal for each set of funds probably helps with decision making in the long run.
And in addition to like the technical products, I think also CPS funds, it makes sense to use CPS funds to help grow the community. I think that would qualify as like a public good that would benefit the wider Icon ecosystem.
Can you give a bit more context on what you mean by would benefit the community? Do you have a specific domain in mind or something?
Yeah, so any like marketing or communications content that could be created to spread the Icon brand and recognition. I think last year, like Studio Mirai's video production proposal helped kick off the Icon YouTube channel, so that was a great value add for the community. And I'd like to see more types of initiatives like that be proposed this year as well.
Cool. Yeah, I agree with that. And one of the things, just to comment a little bit, that I like about Paul, I'll answer your question in a second. That I like about the what you just brought up about the Studio Mirai plus the Icon YouTube channel is that it has legs after the CPS funding is completed. This one's like really nice because it's like you get this initial product, it's awesome, it gets attention, and then people are aware of this thing that like it's so clear the way that it can be run autonomously afterwards, you know? It doesn't require more CPS funding to just add more videos, but now we've like started the precedent and grow the audience. So yeah, I like that a lot. If anyone has more comments on that, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll move to Paul's question. Okay. Paul asks, what is the community? So Paul, you can probably look a little bit. I know people don't like the way that this page looks, and I'm sorry, it will get improved. Shout out, Robbie. But the community is can basically be thought of as like a collection of motivated individuals that are engaging with this specific like ecosystem in either predefined or their own kind of unique ways. The way I kind of structured the definition of it through this thing, the builder program, is by defining the ambassador as a person who like facilitates communication and hosts events, the technical member who builds products and stuff, the business developer who creates ideas and manages teams, the content creator who, you know, like makes videos, writes articles, communicates, the user who interacts with the product. And so if you created like, and then someone else who like maybe has a role that I haven't been able to think of yet, but if you can think of like the sort of connected graph of like, you know, essentially it always boils down to people, right? That's what I'm defining as community. It's like a collection of people. And then if you created like the connected graph of like who those people are, you could kind of color that graph by these roles and then figure out like how are resources moving throughout the ecosystem and what actions are causing those resources to move. And the word community is just like a catch-all term for defining the dynamics of the ecosystem based off of like, you know, these people and the like mechanics that are like roughly in their minds when they want to pursue some sort of a participation. Yeah. So let's see if we got anything else. I'll put out the agenda earlier for the next one. I'm gonna say that we can go for 1 month because I feel pretty good about like this wasn't too much time that we used, and to me at least it felt productive. I will say one of the main things that I'm gonna do for the next one is like get a specific project or two from the community, and then we're kind of going to discuss like what about it worked and what about it didn't work, and then use that to generalize feedback. Looks like Robbie is giving some thoughts, and Norse Kiwi is agreeing with the idea of doing monthly. And again, like if you've got time, show up. If you're motivated, show up. If you want to be some sort of a leader in this development, you know, that would be awesome. But if you don't, then I'll keep you updated. We'll keep posting all this stuff publicly, and then the recordings will be available if you want to just like passively check in. I'm going to sort of read through what Robbie put in the comments. Robbie was saying thoughts about voting process. So the first thought is commission-based validators without DAO-based decision-making on the CPS in place should be limited because of monopoly risk and high-level segmentation of proposals for different domains and funding streams. I want to open it up to TJ for a second to comment on Robbie's first suggestion, because I think that you'll have some good thoughts on that and maybe be able to dissect it a little bit, if you're open to that at least. TJ, you there?
Yeah, sorry. I generally agree with the thought process behind like not necessarily limiting, but you know, if the majority of the validators with like the strongest vote is just one person voting, how that could be considered like a monopoly risk. I'm thinking about it from like a protocol perspective, and I'm not like highly technical, so maybe there is a way,
Yeah, it's all
but
good.
like I'm trying to think of how that would actually be implemented, because I don't know if you can check the blockchain if there's a validator that has like a DAO-based system. So
Oh, I see.
I feel like that would probably need to be implemented like socially, which is probably fine. But there would just need to be some type of social standard behind that.
Gotcha. So basically, to just expand on that concept, the validators can kind of be separated into like, you know, maybe more individuals, or like private entities with less people, and DAO-based entities with like, you know, more people potentially, and like sort of a more open decision-making process. And one of the things that is interesting to note is that if you've got less people that are voting and they've got a strong vote, then there's a risk of a monopoly. So, yeah, I think like in terms of technical ways to do it, you could do an opt-in system, kind of the way that like you've got, you know, Ethereum's verified contracts or the Solana verified contracts. Like you could verify your validator in some way by like subscribing it to some format of like similar to how Agora looks, right? Like you know that they're all DAOs because they're using that system. You could potentially do that. You could kind of hand check it as well. I would say that that fits under the longer term goals, things that are like interesting to note but require more of like a game theory analysis. I want to also note that one of the approach is I'm just going to write this. And then, so basically what I'm saying is that like, I agree with Robbie, it requires further investigation. This is something I was thinking about for some of these other long-term ideas as well, like funding buckets and, you know, things like milestone-based funding. They all seem like good ideas, but we should be more diligent in our research before deciding to make a decision to do it or not. And what I want to do is just like have a sort of accessible but also like slightly formal way of thinking about that problem. A payoff matrix is like an economic concept for understanding a game in the game theory analysis. I think that that could be one easy way for people to see like, oh, this does seem like a good idea, or oh, you're not accounting for this, or, you know, just facilitate discussions. And then comment from Ravi is that explore monopoly risks based off of validator type, e.g. DAO or private, and strength of vote. This goes under longer term protocol upgrades. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up and basically like, well, I guess I'll let it go for another few minutes. a comment from Encrypto is we should incorporate the DAO proposals in voting to Discord. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Paul says, why not centralize CPS, pay a high-performing project leader. Norse Kiwi says, adding about CPS funding uncovering transaction costs. So I guess what I'm going to do is collect a lot of these comments. These are really good comments. And then just put them in here for sort of further thought. I will say, though, that this is a really good discussion. And when we end this meeting in a minute or two, we should continue this discussion. And what I will like to propose is that we move it to the UG sustainability channel. So if possible, Arosh, would you please help facilitate adding the folks that are interested to that channel? So I would just go with everybody from this group, I guess, and then, leave it if you don't want to be in it. Does anybody else have... Awesome, thank you. Does anybody else have things that they want to bring up in like a verbal way?
I can just quickly say, I've just left the comment, but where I worked in my last project, we were going through Juicebox DAO, and the way we'd done it for proposals to get acceptance was we had a council of 8 people on our team, and that was mixed of team members, large holders, and I think there are a couple of other community members as well. And for it to make a successful completion of the funds being distributed, 5 out of the 8 people had to agree this, and this is outside of the actual person who's proposed it and all the voters that had voted on it. And that should stop your problem with having people just trying to monopolize it and getting people all to vote on it in one big pot, because there are going to be some people with higher weight in their voting power, I guess, depending on how much they hold. I don't know if that's a thing for
Can you expand on that a little bit? You had 8 people who had access to the treasury keys, which is, you're saying the analogy would be the CPS treasury, and then 5 out of 8 would be required to accept the proposal in order for it to get funded?
Exactly. So we had three team members. There were then 3 people who had quite large holdings and influence in the project, and then there were another 2 people from the community that all had access, and they were respected community members, of course, not just random people. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the council, if you like. And then you would have many people who, well, the way we did it is you had to have a certain amount of tokens to be able to make the proposal in the first place. But anyone who held that amount could make a proposal, and to stop the kind of, I suppose, way of monopolizing it, as you said, some people may have got 50 votes to get it accepted, which was totally fine, but it could just be 50 people of, I don't know, that community, if you like, and that's not what you really want to see. Gotcha. So you have that council sitting on the top to go, is this a legit request? Because it could just be something along the lines of, I need 50k just to have a bit of fun. And you could get it easily accepted by 50 votes going through, if you know what I mean. So
I see. So you're saying the proposal itself should be...
Yeah, it's like a governance layer to stop stupid proposals going through.
Interesting. Wow, that's kind of an interesting idea. There should be... so the way that it kind of works is anyone can propose, and then we vote on the proposals, and you're saying what if we also made it so that we vetted the proposals themselves before even deciding if they should be funded? Is that what I'm... Yeah.
Yeah, it goes to a superior council who, know the project or work on the project. Sorry, I should say the blockchain in this case. Yeah, work on, say, Icon. Yeah.
Can we, sorry, continue what you're saying.
No, that was it. I was just trying to think of the other thing I was going to say, but I've lost it. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, we used Gnosis wallet, which is quite good for kind of authentication keys and management of treasuries. So, and I think Gnosis might work with Icon. I'm not sure. I haven't tried.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to look into that.
I think
That's
one quick point
Sure.
on the Gnosis safe thing. I think in a way CPS kind of works as a not specifically how Gnosis safe works, but it's like permissionlessly as like validators join the CPS, the amount of like signers and like threshold for passing a vote does like increase. So it's not specifically through like a multi-sig, but in a way, I feel like it kind of does act like a multi-sig, kind of enforced through smart contracts. So
Yeah.
I think like definitely in Crypto's point was very good, especially if there is like a pathway towards like having a council to vet proposals, then something like that definitely should be used. But I guess in this current form, I feel like current CPS voting does act pretty similar. Besides the fact having like the stake weighted voting as well, which I guess isn't typical for a multi-sig.
Yeah, well, it's like very subtly different. But I do agree with you, there's a lot of similarities, and I think it could be done in a way with just smart contract additions as well.
Yeah, and one other quick point, I think Gnosis Safe doesn't support, or we wouldn't be able to use Gnosis Safe for icon projects. I could be wrong on that. I feel like I've only saw like EVM projects use it. However, I do believe, I think Icon Nation in the Icon community built Icon Safe, which is a similar concept. So that would be something that could be used.
But like you say, it almost sounds like it's kind of happening in a similar way already, so maybe it's not as useful.
Yeah, I think it'd be useful for sure if like a council is created, as you wouldn't want all 8 members to have final voting decisions on like whether or not a proposal would be like moved on to the next stage. So I think having like a multi-sig for that type of decision making makes a lot of sense.